Huh. I guess life is really like a box of chocolates, isn't it, Salty? Hey, be littler. I want you to be little right now. Look at him. See how pissed he is right now? I got big on him and he fucking tweaked a little bit. So damn deep fake I make. Alright, enough of that. You pause. So we'll come back in here. We'll finish that off. I can go back to it. Just wanted to throw it up there with my data conversation and the deep fake for what it is. And get them up in there. Those ones. Oh, they are definitely not the only thing I've been on today. But you would have to hack my hardline to figure it out, which isn't very hard. Really can signal strength on. And I would be like, yeah, let's do. So we go back to Salty Spot. Yeah, let's do that. Thank you, Jamie. A lot about, this is Tomb stuff, but I play it like it's Tomb. That really doesn't have it to do it, but I'm busy enough where all the time I'm going to bury somebody. Inside here, it becomes too much in the system. Reach in, life's like a box of chocolate. Okay, that one. I can hit Sun Tzu, the Bible, the General Relativity math book, and now so shall you. Pretty straightforward. I am A, and now you are too. When you start to see squared, seeing it in 3D is just going to be another step to the fourth dimension in 2D land. Kind of little steps you got to take for being the alpha or understanding emotional contagion of the shilling at the bottom of the beer to get them to take a machine gun nest because they want to be buried there. The momentum. It would be a sector that some that say they do ramp up on it. Jiu-jitsu, cave guy on the front, usually an 18 to 25-year-old at the house out in front of the crudes, just hanging out, part of the militia, just in the manor, Pharaoh, mine 20 silver pieces under denial about how do I keep it this hard. I love the joke, definitely plays, can't help it, in gravity, terminal velocity, zeros and one. You need that marshmallow. Back to Sienna Acrolite again, that one where they put the computer in the room with marshmallows, acid in the tank.
Research results in the Technical Papers program. Track your simulated particles more accurately with this
Today we are going to talk about one of my absolute all-time favorite pieces of math. It's incredibly fundamental to engineering, to mathematics itself, to quantum mechanics, but it's something that has a terrible, terrible name. We call them complex numbers. And worse than that, the things that bring about complex numbers we call imaginary numbers. And before we get into any of it, what I want to do is start with kind of a poll. Just to poll the audience on seeing what you guys consider to be, real. What do you consider to exist when it comes to numbers?
Because you will. And you'd be against me in competition. Mason's game, Downport 365 sphere, I'll take on Salty with Putin and Xi with Biden jumping out of the box. Fuck it, Red Bull.
I just want to ask you a very simple question. Okay? So let's go ahead and pull it up here. Pull it on up.
The gravity is good. Very good.
Ooh, for whatever reason,
the world is your momentum. I'm part of it. We peoples. Pride. Write it down.
There we go. Took a little delay there. Among the values, 2, square root of 2, square root of -1, and infinity, which would you personally consider to really exist, whatever really existing means to you? So, in theory, if you guys go to 3b1b.co/live, you should be able to answer this, and then the statistics based on your answers are going to start populating the screen. We won't know what those answers refer to.
You don't understand that. You might call them whatever, but they're black and white electron.
Another one that's pretty close behind it. And as your answers come in, and as the servers kind of digest them, we'll start to see some of the stats.
This is how you play that game. I'm going to take grandmasters on the chessboard because they literally understand chess well enough to N1 half.
Is at the very top.
I'm hitting them hard with it because it takes things like New York City drill sergeants, turn over to NCO board training, N1 half, and a triangulation of a three-phase motor build.
Anytime you have a question or a comment that you want to, insert into the
you wouldn't even know. I'd be coming here, tag.
It's going to be pulled up here, and it looks like we already have one. This is from Yash Dave, who asks, if you could rename
9
the
bars.
complex numbers and the so-called imaginary numbers to something more intuitive, to a name that conveyed the fact that they have numerous applications in the real world, what
He
would you
wouldn't
name
if
them?
he had a
I
high-end
couldn't be happier
index
that
or
you
somebody
asked,
on the
Yash.
spectrum
So
who
I have one
had,
friend who seems
and
very
it
passionate
worked.
about the fact that we should call them sneaky numbers. Personally,
Euler,
I'm very fond
Bell.
of trying to connote spinning and rotation. And this is one of the things we'll talk about in today's lesson, is the fact that what we call complex
I didn't
numbers,
really
what we
much
call imaginary
follow the
numbers,
series on
some of the main
lockdown
uses
math,
that they
this being
have
episode
come
3.
from very
Reach in, grab out of the
elegant
treasure
descriptions
chest,
of
too
how to
much for
rotate
anybody to
stuff. And
mask,
I hope
but
you'll
still
kind of see
accept.
what I mean as
You
we-
could go
as we
way
proceed with
back,
that.
even though you
So on
knew
our
I had
poll,
it wrong.
asking you guys which numbers
Still
you
within
consider
0
to
and 1
really
on the dual
exist,
diagnosis
which is
of
of
what
course
that
a
would look
subjective
like,
question. There's no right or wrong
bouncing
answer here.
ship and
I am genuinely curious,
just
actually, how this
get your
breaks down,
tune
because
down.
it's not at all a
Well, the
strong
momentum
consensus in
come
one
up
direction.
and you do something
It
like
seems like we've got
217 or
three
the
top
Prophet.
contenders, and
You do it more than
then
you
three
think,
that are
Hellboy.
falling pretty evenly behind that. So let's go ahead and take a look. What do you consider to really
What do you
exist
get?
when it comes to numbers? Now, I can imagine which
Have to
ones
take
might be
me
the
to
top
church
two,
in
but
that
I'm very
stone
curious
mill
about
about
the fact that
flipping
there's
rock
three
and doing
all
stuff,
kind of
cowboy.
coinciding with each other there. And it looks like I'm getting a little bit of a delay before the reveal, so there's kind of this nice dramatic pause. I'll tell you, for
I'm
me
gonna
personally,
ride
I
him
feel
like
it's
he's
very
my
silly to
new
answer anything
Montana
that's
walking
either-
horse down
that's
the
not
line.
all of them or none of
Salty,
them.
you're gonna kick
I
like
can maybe
Sherpa.
understand if someone wants to treat infinity
By
as something
definition of the
different because
universe.
it's ill-defined. There's lots of different things that might mean. But
Hop 'em up, hot
insofar
shit
as
out here. You
numbers
know to leave
exist
him
at all,
alone
if
because
you
that's
consider
what
a
hits
number
that
is
button
a
and
real
42
thing,
explodes.
then it would. Oh man, I can't believe that we're stalling out on this one. We had fixed it by
Fuzzies
live
come
stream
off.
too, but I guess there's going to be
Blink,
an oscillation
wink,
between when
purr,
it works and when
light
it
it on
doesn't.
fire. Fusion.
But for
Two
me personally,
sticks.
basically,
Between A
anytime that you
and B,
have,
they are congruent.
a numerical
X,
construct that's
Y,
helpful in the
which
real
is
world.
tough because,
You know,
like I
I
said,
consider
you
that
hit
real. I would say
mathematicians
that if it's
on
something
this
that's actually
chessboard
useful
being
in
an
an
83
application,
Hunters
then
Prize
it is as real as words are, right?
AR-15
You're
0-1
never going to run
treasure
into
chest
an
and
abstract word
Marie.
like happiness out there, but it has a kind of reality in our minds.
Shade,
And
drink
things like the
coffee.
square root of 2, which you can't express as a fraction, or things like the square root of -1 that don't show
But
up
of course,
among real
I
normal
say it's
numbers.
Bluestone Wolf patch in there. I mean,
you
that
know,
thing
even
would
if
be
they might
buried
seem a
and
little
need to
bit
be
different.
radioactive standing on
This
top
is such
of
a
the world.
shame. I'm genuinely curious to see what your answers are, but it's not showing up for me, which I suppose means we'll have to move on with the lesson. But this will presumably begin
When we
working
do,
by the end, and we can
give
maybe pull
them
things up
blue
again.
lit fucking tags. Step a
so,
patch on them and call
let
it
me go ahead and
AR670-1.
Put that away. What I'd like to do for you today, basically, is show you the sense in which imaginary numbers are useful.
Believe
and
me,
complex
that's
numbers
how
are
you got it.
useful.
Thank you, Marie.
And from there, maybe
Appreciate
try
it.
to imbue them with a little more reality. I won't assume that you know what they are yet. It's meant to be a basic primer. But let's just dive right in, okay?
Because
the
he
end, by the way, the
target
very
range
end
Paris
here,
Island.
I want to talk about
All
two different
100%,
trigonometric
600
functions.
yard
And this is kind of
charge.
the thing that we're going to build to. Two identities from trigonometry.
Got toy bounced
And
over you for a minute.
I understand
Like
that
body
maybe, these complicated identities from trigonometry is not going to be the best way to lure some people into understanding, oh yeah, complex numbers, they're really
You
useful,
know
you're really
somebody
gonna
that
love
is
them.
like almost
But I
the
do think
words
it's
were
interesting that you
carved
can have
in
a
stone,
fact that has
penned in
nothing to
blood.
do with complex
Understand?
numbers
Like,
or the
so I
square root of
play it like
-1.
it's this,
It's just
something from the
trigonometry. It's
past
everything
when
we
I'm
were
still
talking about
doing
last
me.
time. And you can have
That's
facts
how
that are
I
pretty hard
figured
to
it out.
remember. I
Probably a
remember when
lot
I
of
was in
them did
school
because it would
and
come
we
out
learned these
similar
addition
given the
formulas,
tone and
that
the
if you want to know the
frequency.
cosine of the sum of two different
And it's
angles,
definitely going to be
you know,
clicks
it's
and
this
ticks,
kind of long
ugs, and
thing in terms of
differential
cosines and
eschatology
sines of the
slash
original two angles.
omega.
There's this minus sign that would always trip people up. If you do the same for the sine, it looks similar, but there's a plus sign, and instead of having cos, you have cosine. It's something that's very error-prone if you're just trying to memorize it as it is. However,
Skid
if
steer
you
means
come at it
stop.
with
Means
complex
asteroid
numbers,
over there moving
this
at causal.
is not only much
coming
less
in at
error-prone,
hot,
it has a
moving at
very
sea.
beautiful meaning,
You
and it
put
just
a
falls
nuclear
right out.
reactor in a skid
So even if
steer
you
and
don't
expect
necessarily
that
believe
anything
in
less
the
than
reality of the square root of -1,
either
you at the
Chernobyl
very least have to admit that it's
or
interesting
been
that it can
eater
make other
feeding,
pieces
sir,
of math useful, that
on
other
farm.
pieces of math a little bit more understandable too. And
Put a physicist
trigonometry is
in a
just the
skid
tip of the
steer
iceberg.
and tell him
If
to
you
work
talk
it
to
out.
anybody who's in engineering, anybody who's going into serious math, they'll tell you that complex numbers are as real a part of their work and their life
You can
as
nit
real
gritty
numbers
up
are.
there, which is the same
But
damn
the
thing you
starting
find over
point
Paris Island.
looks
for.
very strange, okay? When you start introducing this, the
Better
very
be.
first thing you do is to say, assume that there's some number I, so that I squared is equal to -1. And I think to a lot of students, there's maybe one of two possible reactions that you can have here. One is,
Well,
no,
there
there
comes a time
isn't.
when I run out of shit
Anytime
to
I
do,
square a number,
I'll
even
go
if
fly
it's
fishing
negative,
with
if
the
I
general,
take
and he'll
-5,
stomp me out on
for
that
example,
pond.
and I square it,
It will.
well, a negative
It'll
times
happen.
a negative is a
I
positive.
gotta do it
so I
gracefully
get
is the best
25.
Murphy I can be.
Any number that you square, if it's positive, well, that just
You
stays
go
positive.
all the way and it hits the
So
wall.
it seems like no matter what,
Big
when I'm
collision.
squaring numbers,
Makes
I
perfect
always
sense,
get a positive
General.
number.
I mean, it
I'm
really
never going
does.
to
You
get
walked
anything
out there,
negative.
you knew it
So
was Mike
this does not
Crow
exist,
and you
no
got to
such
play
number.
dirty jobs today. Dance, monkey,
However,
dance.
if a mathematician comes and says, oh, no, it exists, we've defined it so that that's the case. I think the other reaction someone can have is, hang on a second, you
Anybody
can do that?
else?
When you have a problem that you can't solve, you can just say, oh, I've
Go
defined
grab
things so
the
that we now
bugs
magically
on
have a
Beacon
solution.
Tree.
Okay, next time I'm having trouble with my homework and I don't know what the answer
Almost
to x
ready.
is, I will be like, let x be the value defined to be the answer to this question. So if you're uncomfortable with this, you're definitely not alone. In fact, René Descartes coined the term imaginary for these numbers as a derogatory.
Work.
It was meant to make fun
There
of the
goes
fact
James
that
out.
obviously there is no such answer and it shouldn't be taken as serious math. And then we stuck with that as a
I
convention,
take them
and we
when
still
they're
call
done,
them imaginary numbers,
and I go
which is genuinely
throw
absurd.
them at motherfuckers
But
down
that's
there.
not the only weird assumption that we make. The second weird thing that you do when you start talking about complex numbers is to say, there's not
We
just
get
such a
that
number
weird
I,
thing.
but we're going to give it a home. Instead of the real number line, which, all of these numbers we know when we
This is
square
greatly
them,
not
you can't get a
described.
negative. What we do is say, I lives in a different dimension. I lives perpendicularly.
Somebody
There's one
look,
above,
like, Mark Mulligan,
and then
be
there's
damned
one
if he
below,
was.
negative I, and you can have negative 2i. You scale it however you want. Essentially, it's proposing that numbers be two-dimensional, and that I has a very
So
specific
reality
home,
starts to pull a little
1 unit
different
perpendicular,
down there at the fourth dimension.
perpendicularly
We
above
just
the real
say
number
it's
line.
3 to 4,
And,
3's you on the...
Okay, if we
You
want to
couldn't, you'd
extend
be
our
looking at
number
it
system,
forever, kid.
I
That's
get
usually
it. Maybe
explaining
it's
it to
useful
the
to
old
put
school.
some kind
You'd
of
be
number
looking
up
at it
there.
forever, kid.
But why I, right? Why not say infinity is the number that sits 1 unit above 0, or 1 divided by 0, or any other problem that you couldn't solve before and you make up an
It
answer
gives me
to?
something
Why
like
should that
Zeus,
live
sit
there?
your
What on
happy ass
earth
down.
does the idea
Jesus
of a
got
point,
the wheel.
1 unit
Get over
above
it.
the real number line in a separate dimension have to do with squaring
If you don't like
-1?
it, Judas is in room
So I hope
20.
to answer this for you. At the very beginning, let's just talk about how if you're adding numbers that are two-dimensional like this, the rules are pretty straightforward, and it operates essentially the same as vectors, for any of you who might be familiar with vectors.
So we got to play it
let's
off and
say,
make sure it's hitting the
hypothetically,
colleges
I have
first. It's
a
hot as
number-
shit when it happens
oh, I
in the
don't know, let
office
me
at that board meeting because I'm
one
trying to
here that's gonna be
readjust the
4
alien
plus I.
spacecraft and be on the proper trajectory of the
And
collision
then I'm going
at
to take a
sea.
second number, and it's helpful to draw them as vectors, kind of an arrow from the
I gotta
number
play.
0.
It's not just I
And
want
this
to
one
do
is
it.
gonna
It's I
end
got to have
up at
something. It's not just going to
negative
download
2
something. You
plus
hard on
2i.
workforce program. Oh
So what I'm
damn!
saying
Look
is,
at that working,
you take the
Jewel.
real number
Toss it
negative
in the
2,
pond over
and
here.
then you move in that perpendicular direction into the
Fucking
extension
Reaper
of our
pops
number
up. I'm
system.
happy this
Which
is
again,
going the
kind
way.
of
Where we
asking
going,
the
buddy?
students to take a lot on faith here that you're okay to do that you're allowed to just
I got a
pretend
bunny
that the
looking at
numbers
you.
extend in this direction. If you take that on faith and you follow, hopefully the fact that it becomes useful helps to
'Cause
justify
otherwise, it
why
didn't
we're
work
doing
before.
any of
Too
this.
passive,
So my question for you
Matthew,
is
or any
simply, what happens
differential
when we
across
add
the
these two
mic, being
numbers?
terracotta arm,
Now,
you're showing up on the
assuming
demon
that our
core.
question system has not broken down, I should be able to do this as a proper poll. And let me go. Well, I guess we can first check the previous poll. Okay, things seem to be working.
Those are
so
your
we can take a
options.
little step back in the lesson. So I'm just genuinely curious. I want to know how you guys answered on this one.
All of them?
It looks like there's a back and forth between answers F and D.
Because it
So
can
F
be. Not that it
is all
is.
of them.
It's
Saying
based
that all
in
of these should be
gravity, but
considered
there's an
real.
M2 trajectory to
Interesting. D
being
is the
any
one
one
that
of
says you
those to
should
the
consider
differential.
two
Now,
squared root of
should it
negative
have
one, but
crypto?
not infinity. So there's
But
a
they're
good
off
contingent
on
of you out
Common
there who
Core
just
of,
reject infinity as being
I had a
considered real,
class,
but are very
here's a
comfortable
solid
with the square root of
program,
negative
worked
one.
for me
That's
and my
awesome.
guys, but
And
here's
then
a
after
brand
that,
new
it looks like
guy
C, people who reject
right
the
off
square
the
root of
hop.
negative
Might as
one.
well be
Fascinating. I
backward
actually would have
glad.
thought that none of them would have come higher than that.
Just saw
One of them is
Jaguar
much lower
program
at
to a
A.
guy. Now,
Okay,
I've been
so it looks
exposed
like
to the
we've got a cohort
radiation of that
people who are
math problem
comfortable
that
with
had to
negative
live
one.
in
A large
that
cohort are
Goldilocks zone for
uncomfortable
a
with
little while.
infinity. That's a topic for another day. Don't worry about it.
You get that, and
and then a number
it'll
of
cheat in
people
your
who
answer
are
because I
kind of
want
in
to give
that
you the
middle ground,
advantage. I
maybe
want to
not
give you
being
the
super comfortable with
M2
the idea that
comparatively
negative
the
one might be
M1
real.
on it because
Let's
then
see if
you'll
we can convince
understand
them
you're in
the
a
difference.
dual diagnosis problem of
So
having a
for
cat.
our first, much more mathematical
Arbitrarily,
question,
you'll pass
it's kind
right
of a
past
warm-up.
that number. You don't need to
I
be
just want to ask you
handed
to
to
add
you.
these
It's just
things.
shit out
Before
your
I taught
tags
you
or any
how to add
goddamn
them,
shiny on here.
Make a guess at how it might work, and
But it works.
I hope that it feels pretty
Degrees,
straightforward. Addition is actually the least
temperatures,
interesting part of this,
cups of
but
stuff.
it's a good thing to know when you're
Couple
learning about
Marines,
complex numbers.
or, buttons.
It's definitely one of those operations that you are going to need to know. Unfortunately, and you can tell by the fact that I'm
Not that
stalling in what I'm
Of course,
saying
the
here,
weakness of the herd.
it looks like the
Of course.
question is still not loading completely correctly. So I'm going to have a stern word with Cam and Eater behind the scenes.
I suggest you do,
We've
Sharp.
always built such a beautiful, beautiful interface that's helpful for this kind of back and forth between you guys and me. I'm going to have a stern word with them behind the scenes, but in the meantime, let's go ahead and move forward.
200,000 frames per second.
So I guess I can pull it up on the just on the piece of paper, and you can follow along at home, see what the addition might be. It turns out to be relatively straightforward. If you're moving 4 units to the right and then 1 unit up, and you want to add the idea of moving 2 units to the left and then 2 units up, well, you just do each of those one at a time.
All the time. I could have built a supersonic cannon, figured out time dilation in the real world to slow your ass down to exactly 200,000 frames per second because they've done it. They've done it. It's how it was. What it was. It wasn't 9. It was no. It was 2,000 frames per second.
And then when you work that out, 4 minus 2 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. A nice simple introduction here. Addition doesn't really have anything complicated going on, which is great. That means that it's one fewer thing for us to worry about. What is so complex about complex numbers after all? Well, where everything becomes interesting
Put it down, China.
is when you try to
go
multiply
buzz in
these numbers
Thailand
together.
one more goddamn
So
time,
with
starting a
vectors,
problem.
there's not really any notion of multiplying them to get 2 vectors back, at least when we're in the 2D plane. You have some notions like cross products and dot products that in 3 dimensions can get you something like it. But the rules end up being very different
off
from
that shit.
that
No,
in the number system.
no,
You can't really do
critical theory.
algebra. You can't do things like assume that if 2 numbers multiply to make 0, then one of them has to be 0. But complex numbers are going to end up behaving much like the real numbers. The rules from algebra can carry over. But to understand what that rotation rule is, I know I'm giving things away, what that multiplication rule is,
I'll take the 2.
I just want to ask you a simple question, which is basically, suppose I have the point 3, 2.
Sign the ledger, guys.
We're not even going to think of it as a complex number per se. If I just have some sort of coordinate
question. Stay behind the chains and right.
With x coordinate 3 and y coordinate 2, what is the 90-degree rotation of this? If I rotate it 90 degrees and let's say counterclockwise.
Well, there's different degrees of it. When I want a battle buddy, and I decide to let you ride me, Salty.
Riding is different.
Montana walking horses.
Counterclockwise. Now, what's lovely about this is we can basically just turn our paper to figure it out. We say, okay, if it started at 3, 2, and I rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise, I can just read that off now as being -2 in the x direction, and then 3 in the y direction.
It would be all upside down pineapple because you do this. Every once in a while, I'm up in the clouds.
We've taken 3, 2, and then we convert it to -2, 3. Something which maybe in our original system,
ooh, she is a hot cookie, man.
Looks like this, -2 and then 3. That's going to be the 90-degree rotation. And what's nice here is that that rule is very simple, and it applies to any pair that we might have. If I took a pair of numbers, a comma b, okay, and then I said, where is that going to rotate to if I rotate it 90 degrees? It's going to end up by swapping the coordinates, b, a, and then making that first one negative.
In the stone mill, I know you know this, 3B. It's like, I know you know the number. I've done the program. I just need you to do it too.
Again, twice. And I'm going to go and take this. I swap the 2 coordinates. We get a, -b.
It's going to devalue it. It's not going to be like, oh. It's like, yeah, and that's why it hurts, dude.
Well, what's happening
I'm not saying it doesn't give you other things. Certainly tweak.
And that's reassuring, because if I take some point,
but I can't guarantee that that's what it's going to do for you if you don't stay on the track. And it starts to be the program, de Lagrange, and you wind up taking some people out. They were good, it's a system, tink, 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 there's their stone.
That will be the same as a 180-degree rotation.
Eschatology and being the devil anyways.
Should look like this, ignore the other vector that I drew. Which is just taking both of the coordinates and making them negative.
Pause.
Negative a.